The county executive presents his proposed budget to us in September, middle of September. And our budget review office goes and looks at his proposal and analyzes it. And then at some point comes to the legislature and says, okay, here's what we think about the budget. Here's what we think you should do or not do, take out, add in, whatever, based on what we believe to be reality. What the sales tax numbers are actually going to look like, what our Medicaid costs are going to look like, what our pension costs are going to look like. And so then we go about the business of looking at our budget review office's report and coming up with amendments based on those presentations. Here's where it gets a little tricky. Any of us 18 legislators can put together our own budget amendments. But what they do is they assemble a group of 9 legislators. Why 9? There are 18 members of the legislature. Why do they pick 9? Well, if they pick 10, they would violate the open meetings law, and they'd have to have their meetings in public. So instead, they appoint 9, and the members are appointed by the presiding officer. They appoint 9, they put them in the basement of the legislature. They say to the rest of us legislators, you can listen outside the room, but you can't come in the room because then we'll violate the open meetings law. So they put legislators outside the room. They've invited me, and every time I complain about this, they say, well, you can come down and sit outside the room. But so they do this. They assemble this group of people together. They put together what's called an omnibus budget amendment. Does anyone know what an omnibus budget amendment is?
I think it's something where you take everything and put it in one bill.
Yeah, they take it's an everything but the kitchen sink bill, right? So omnibus budget amendments for the county typically contain a little more than 1,000 line items of changes to the county executive's operating budget. So this group of 9 legislators sits in a basement room. It's literally a basement room in the legislature, behind closed doors, comes up with, you know, they put their own little things in there, whatever they want to do. They come up with this budget amendment, amending 1,000 line items in the county executive's budget. And, you know, you would think that once they're done with it, they'll give it to us. We have several weeks to look at it. You know, everyone can digest the information, propose some changes or whatever, and we're done, right? That would be the logical thing to do if you're going to accept the basement room meetings. But no. Steve was referring to last year's process. Last year, I and my colleagues received the proposed amendment containing 1,000 line items to the county executive's budget a little after 10 p.m. election day night. Now think about this. We're all in a big room celebrating, or not celebrating, depending on who you are. And, you know, I look at my smartphone, and here it is. Here's the amendment, 1,000 line items. We vote on that amendment the following morning at 10 a.m. How is this possible? How is it fair? How is it honest? How is it transparent? It's none of those things, except for possible, because it is what they do. And this is the way they've done things year after year after year after year. So now that I've set the table, what are we going to do about it? I file, well, we have to wait till next November for that, for us. We run every 2 years, next November we run again. I've proposed a series of bills, and on the table in the back, or the table on the side, wherever Judy's put them, you have copies which you can take with you. All right, I call it the Taxpayer Awareness Act. And it's a series of 3 bills. The first bill says very simply, we will vote on the operating budget, which determines your tax levy, whether or not we're raising your taxes. We will vote on that bill the day before, or no later than the day before Election Day, rather than the day after Election Day. Because I think that would be a little more honest with you, don't you think?
Yes.
Do you agree that that would be better, to know how your legislators voted on your taxes prior to actually voting for them or against them? I thought that was it seems to make sense to me. The second piece of legislation says, you know, this 9 members in a basement room doesn't really sit well with me. It doesn't pass the smell test with the voters. It shouldn't sit well with any of those legislators. Well, by the way, I say smell test. I don't really literally mean smell test. It is a small room and it does get kind of heated, but it's not. So anyway, the second bill says that any meetings to determine budget amendments for the county must be held in public. Why not? Why wouldn't you want to have a meeting in public? You all know the answer to that question. It's rhetorical. Okay? So we have a budget committee in the legislature. Give it to the budget committee. These guys are looking at budgetary things all year long. That's the committee that should be looking at the budget amendments and composing these budget amendments in public, with public input, so that, I mean, you know, there are a number of constituencies that get affected by our operating budget, right? I mean, there's taxpayers, first and foremost. There's employees, who are important. There are agencies, not-for-profit agencies, contract agencies that do quite a bit of work for the county. They have some skin in the game. They should have some input as well. And you know, maybe, just maybe, you'd actually craft a budget that way that made some sense and that actually could work for Suffolk County. So that's the second bill. The third bill says that when one of these budget amendments is proposed, it should be proposed at least 5 days prior to voting on the bill. None of this last-minute BS that happens. This way, all of you and all of us on the legislature, all of our employees, all of those contract agencies, everybody, can have a look at the proposed amendment and comment on it and make decisions based on some sense of, you know, understanding, as opposed to the politics that happens now. So those are 3 bills that I proposed. They're all local laws.